what role the Koch brothers are playing. And yeah, it is true the Koch brothers are these almost like, again, cartoon evil. I'm certainly interested in them, but you see, the very fact that the media covers them so heavily, and particularly the left alternative media, makes me suspicious that maybe they're not as important as they're presenting them as. Because my rule is, if the media pays a lot of attention to something, it can't really matter. And I would say that they're a distraction, and they volunteered to be, like Karl Rove, the lightning rod, so that we focus on them rather than the fact that this is actually a phenomenon that's much, much broader than them. That's my take on that. The question was, how do we find out who's pulling the strings, and how do we break their power without a revolution? I would argue that, gentlemen, I can't even remember if I fully answered his question. It was about secrecy, and that we need more transparency. We need to shine more of a light, and I think that goes to your question as well. We need to know a lot more about these people. We need to vigorously demand our rights in the release of records. We have a very good Freedom of Information Act, which has been sort of whittled down a bit under the clauses of the War on Terror. Police departments that used to have to give us reports now say it's an ongoing investigation. That's a story we want to do. They say that about everything, and supposedly it's an ongoing investigation. They're still investigating the Titanic. You can't know about these things. So we need to start demanding accountability. We need to support those few elected officials, whether it's Grassley, and you may be may not be a Republican, and he may be, but support him in his inquiry. Support Ron Wyden from your next door state of Oregon, who's been really outspoken. He and one of his colleagues, Udall in particular, have been very outspoken in complaining about these things. Encourage Dianne Feinstein to keep growing a backbone, and if you sort of piss off the right people, they'll start doing something. The thing is that, it's a sport in the United States to attack and make fun of and undermine elected officials. But the fact of the matter is, we need them. Most of them are not really evil or bad people. They're people like us who, run for office and try to do something. But the system is very tough. It's very hard to make a difference. You see that with a Kucinich or something. Who listens to him? And so, I think that those people need support, and they need I'm not talking about just campaign contributions, because I think that's like dumping it all down a mine shaft. And I think a lot of that's a waste of money. But I mean, just once they're in there, is to take an interest in the bills that they're sponsoring and get other people to talk about them. There's always a tipping point on these things. If enough people, you probably know that in your community, if somebody's got an eyesore on their lawn or something, I mean, suddenly everybody's out with pitchforks, So there's a tipping point, and I think we have to study on issue by issue. What is that tipping point? What would it take to get people to do things? Ask people, to do small things. Again, will you come hear somebody speak? Will you watch this DVD? Will you look at this website? Will you consider, liking this thing on Facebook? I mean, how hard is that stuff? And it really makes a difference. I mean, I'd love who, what, why is, our Facebook thing is going up, but it's kind of like crawling. And I'm thinking, like, why, people love what we do. Why is this not exploding? How hard is it for people to click like or share or something like that? So there are a lot of things that we can do to, and I think there's a point of critical mass. And when you have critical mass, these people respond. Don't forget, they do respond when they sense that the public won't put up with something. I'm sure you can think of examples on many, many things. Certain things get through. I mean, the public wants single payer. They didn't get that, but they got something. And it's better than nothing. Despite the tremendous interest arrayed against it. So I think on quite a few issues, we actually do see some progress when we push it over the line there. How about one more question? Somebody have a question that's going to take everybody away feeling all warm and fuzzy or something? Was that your question, sir?
No, I was thinking still in elections, Karl Rove and Governor Stiglman.
Oh, more depressing stuff. Okay, yeah.
He's in prison, a sitting governor.
Yeah, this question was about former Governor Stiglman of Alabama is in prison. We actually talk about people in Alabama being in prison. We did a story on our website about a blogger who was sent to prison for blogging. in Alabama. And he was there for months and months and months. We wrote a number of articles, interviewed him in jail. And then finally the New York Times wrote something, and now he's out of jail. Did the New York Times cause that? Did we cause the New York Times to look and then write something? We don't know. But that's what I'm talking about, being the phytoplankton in the food chain. We are, all these news organizations are beginning to discover us, beginning to look at us going, yeah, Boston thing is kind of strange. Maybe we need to do something on that. One of my sources. People say, what do you like to read? This is going to sound like a cop-out. If I had a lot of really great things to read online, I would never have created Who, What, Why. There really isn't a lot. I mean, I'll tell you, we do a little compilation of headlines from other places. I read the New York Times because it's full of good information. I read the Washington Post. I read the Nation, and I watch these shows. I mean, I absorb all of these things. But frankly, my main source of information is people like you. You see something and you send it to me, and it's kind of like having a large, like Obama's briefing group of the crew cuts. I got my own briefing group, and people are saying you ought to take a look at this, and I like that. It's kind of like the stuff gets sort of previewed a little bit, and we hear and we see things that we might not otherwise see. People send us stuff from a newspaper in Pakistan or whatever. You have to have your net cast widely. If you get everything you do from some glossy magazine put out of New York, or you watch one network and you think you're getting the truth, you're really getting a skewed perspective. And by the way, it's very interesting that centers like New York and Washington, the people are the worst informed. Do you know this? We've discovered that a lot of our best informed people are people like you out in America. A lot of them don't even have much of a formal education. They're truck drivers and they're farmers or whatever, and they're self-taught. They read books. They go home at night and they're not all watching, the Tonight Show or something. They're curious and they're reading books. Like this gentleman mentioned a book, there are lots of these different books and blogs, and they're reading this stuff and they're thinking for themselves. And we make a mistake when we look up to these gatekeepers. And people say, well, you should be on Jon Stewart. But I mean, he works for a large corporation that's making money off of that stuff. And, his guests are like Bushes and Cheneys and the Yuck It Up. It's a great show. I told somebody the other day I was at the Daily Show. They said, finally. I said, yeah, well, I was in the audience. Eventually maybe they'll invite us on and we won't say no. But the reality is that we don't want these corporate institutions to be defining our worldview for us. And sadly, the chattering class in Washington and New York and LA and stuff, they're kind of in a little bit of a bubble. It's the Truman Show all over again, and their reality is very, very skewed. And also those people have a stake in the system, all those people who voted for Obama and, they drive a Prius and, they compost, every third Thursday and they, this and that. But, they really, they work for large corporate law firms and who are their clients, so there's that cognitive dissonance. And I think they just, they don't know how to renounce all this stuff because they're, we're all sort of hooked up to the matrix.
The matrix is a system, Neil. That system is our enemy. When you're inside, you look around, what do you see? Businessmen, teachers, lawyers, carpenters, the very minds of the people we are trying to save. But until we do, these people are still a part of that system, and that makes them our enemy. Have to understand, most of these people are not ready to be unplugged. And many of them are so inert, so hopelessly dependent on the system, that they will fight to protect it. Were you listening to me, Neo? Or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? I was. Look again.
I think the exciting thing, and I'd like to close with this, is that we can pull ourselves off the matrix. I think the fact that you're here is testament to that there is an uprising happening in America right now. We see it with our own site. Our traffic is zooming. More people are contacting us every day. I've been contacted in the last couple of weeks by people from the military, former military, and intelligence, and all kinds of people saying, I love what you do, and I have some stories I'd like to share with you. I've been afraid, but you're giving me encouragement to come forward and share what I know. And I think what's going to happen, I saw this. I covered East Germany, and I was there before the wall came down, and I saw people beginning to rebel. I saw people, there was a meeting at a pastor's home. Churches, by the way, are very important for this stuff. There was a meeting at a pastor's home, and they were already discussing, could we change this totalitarian society? Because there were already cracks in the system. You may remember back in '89, there were all these people starting to go to the embassies in all those Eastern European countries, and so they started having these meetings. And I got on a bus, and a bunch of young people wearing ski masks got on the bus and quickly passed out leaflets and then got off. And then I was driving with a German guy, and we were taking pictures of this giant garbage plant in East Germany that was burning all the garbage for the West Germany because they didn't want the pollution. And we were taking pictures, and we stopped our car by the side of the road, and these two guys got out of this little East German car. They were wearing big ski jackets, and they said, "What do you think you're doing?" And my friend, who was West German, said, "Oh, fuck off." And I thought, oh, my God, these guys are Stasi agents. We could never be heard from again. And I said, I think you're a little bit overconfident here. And I said, and he said, they have no power anymore. And I said, well, it's not, And so I said to him, listen, you translate, tell them to chill. Everything's cool. Everybody goes their own way and no problems. And they left because they didn't know. And a few months later, when I went to Romania, I was one of the first journalists to make it into that country when they were supposedly overthrowing Ceausescu, although it turns out he was overthrown by his own people, his own internal security people, in a fake, like everything else. But what happened there was that the same kind of thing happened. We were trying to get through the border, and the border office, border police, they wouldn't let us go. And the reporter I was with from Spain was afraid because she'd been turned away, and she thought they'd arrest her. We went into the border station to talk to the head of it, and I said, I'm not worried. She said, why not? I said, look on the wall. What do you see? And she said, nothing. And I said, exactly. On that wall would be pictures of Mr. and Mrs. Ceausescu, and they already took the pictures down. Okay. I think what's happening in this country is all of these people who are complicit are starting to take the pictures down. Thank you very much.